Hey y'all, I'm Atticus, a bookseller at Literati Bookstore and the host for tonight's event. This evening, we are pleased to welcome Jennifer Metzger and Ellen Stone to our At Home with Literati series in support of Hypergraphia and Other Failed Attempts at Paradise. For our attendees, the chat is closed, but I will be dropping links to purchase Hypergraphia from Literati throughout the event. You can also use the Q&A feature on your toolbar to submit questions at any time. I'll ask a selection of them at the conclusion of the event. A reminder that you can shop for more books in-store or at Literati Bookstore for curbside pickup and shipping to your home anywhere in the United States. And now, allow me to introduce tonight's author and moderator. Jennifer Metzger received her MFA in poetry from the University of Michigan and studied painting at the School of Art Institute in Chicago. Her poetry has been featured in Gulf Coast, the Southern Review, Michigan Quarterly, the Journal, Rhino, Bellet Poetry Journal, Cream City Review, and the BBC radio show Shortcuts. She is a writing coordinator at the Penny W. Stamp School of Art and Design. She lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Ellen Stone advises Poetry Club at Community High School, also in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and co-hosts a monthly poetry series. She is the author of What is in the Blood, the Mayapple Press 2020, and The Solid Living World for the Michigan Writers Cooperative Press in 2013. Her poetry has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and the Best of Net. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Jennifer and Ellen. I would just go ahead and unmute your little thing there.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. First, I want to thank Literati for hosting this. I'm so grateful. And I also want to thank a lot of my mentors who helped me write this book. Linda, Haled, Bob, Keith, and others, and my friends and family who really supported me during this time to help me write. As well as my psychiatrist, who really kept me functioning, and not just functioning, but myself. So I want to say thank you to Dr. Lila Masumi. To be able to write is really a gift that I have received from the support from all the people who I know. So I'm going to start off by reading the title poem from this book. It's called Hypergraphia and Other Failed Attempts at Paradise. And this poem really represents a lot of the ways I feel about the world, how its expansiveness and its disappointments, are all present. But I also feel like it's somehow, even though I wrote it a long time ago, it really does feel very current. So, Hypergraphia and Other Failed Attempts at Paradise. It's a dereliction of stray facts, the furry heat of them, that makes me chase half-truths. I'll write anything fanatical to make me forget this tortured life of canopies and calculators and corsets. Those starfish, those creek swallowers, those dangerous words and collisions with the past. The suffering of nonsense seems like fun, until my room is being terrorized by birthday cards, prosaic stars, the fleecing of our pensions, the phony fruit, the hungry tongues, a whetted stone for sharpening our fingers. I cannot see handshakes for what they are, turned clay, handmade, because hands are everywhere, washing off the viruses. Fill a super collider with balsa planes, witness all the planes colliding. Then there is Canada with its vast ice plains. Then there is water and no water. Moons come in a variety of colors. But there aren't enough pillows for everyone. There aren't enough soft landings. There aren't enough drink carts or cave dwellings. There aren't enough trees or heads on Easter Island. There aren't enough mysteries to make this interesting. So most of the poems in this book deal with mental illness, whether it comes from experiences I've had with psychosis and trying to recall that and express it, or just experiences I've had in daily life where I just have too much feeling and it's challenging. And this next poem actually comes from the latter. I wrote it when I had an experience at a faculty meeting, which was a little stressful. It was about trying to get us to work harder. And this is what came out of that. Dark helicopter. When the dark helicopter descends over the neighborhood, we must duck down and cover up the flower beds as the water from the bird bath catapults its skeletons. The lawn breeds black spikes in its oppressive geometric shadow of the helicopter. This is how they grew the nails for the crucifixion. When we say this, it has an extra layer in it. Dark helicopter believes it is an improv coach. It shouts its auto message through crackling speakers. Say yes. It's the same crackle of unwrapping the mints we keep in our jackets to remind us there are no dark helicopters. There are balloons, planets, puppies, snowflakes, mini muffins, but not this wood paneling and this water cooler and this yellow legal pad and this man holding up his hands to describe a new addition to the library. But hands up happens and the helicopter becomes the hands and hands become the helicopter. This is what the mints are for. I'm in a conference room under a broken umbrella, which is to say I have a reservoir on my head to catch the dark weather falling from the helicopter. Stupid, insomniac helicopter threatening to turn my blazer into salsa. You can do this, shouts the helicopter. In a four-way mirror full of conference rooms, a million rooms goose-stepping across my backyard, a man leans out of a helicopter with a megaphone, and the swings whip around, and the roses bleed, and I offer them a tissue. Dark helicopter tries to convince us it has a rainbow inside of it, the same way an oil well hides rainbows inside of its elbow grease. Work harder, yells the helicopter. You can do it. You can be a productive member of society. While it blows the trees sideways and slices up the neighborhood into all the spare parts that humans are made of. This next poem is about a hospital stay I had while I was dealing with psychosis. But you'll notice here, as in other poems, that the television features prominently, and it's also here on my cover. You can see the television. And the television is really thought to be a soothing presence. And you may have noticed in hospitals, the television's always on. In common rooms, the psychiatric ward, the television's always on. I've even tried to turn it off and they won't let you, which is really strange because I find the television really terrifying. And the way it just kind of alters reality and forces you to dissociate out of the moment that you're in, which can be really challenging if you're already in a state of dissociation. So you might notice some of the television interspersed within this poem. It's called Beta Waves Are Not Part of the Ocean, and We Prefer the Ocean. 1. You tell us there is so much love, the sun exploding on the sea, the viridescent little stalks squeezing through the earth, the smell of rot and plenty. But this room has 3 blue walls and an opening for spies. We do not go gently into a night without prime time, Circle K, coffee stains. It's ontological, this rumor that the television must be on, that it will stop violent voice boxes at dawn. 2. All bets are off when the wailing begins. We are bloated by the orderlies in their algae bloomers when the gods come whirling in, scrubbing, bubbles, comet. We must divide and carry cleaning products to shout the grass stains out of sad tigers who lost the ball game to an after-school sugar-coated snack. There's no escape from being a tidy cat. 3. There's nothing special about extra legroom in a desert. The nurses commandeer the remote because these cathodes must not disturb our pharmaceutical bunches, clusters, charms. I have stayed in hotels that were kinder, though no sleep inside their basket weave coverlets. Ice buckets cupped over ears, yet louder squabbles here. Dynamic rinse cycle as we clasp our hands for egg-shaped particles dancing sideways, and the cross-hatched grass beneath a sail on a wheelbarrow. Feed your lawn, feed it. It's April out there in the yards of all our neighbors. They must be dead by now, every lawn we own. 4. Today only, one day only, epic tale title pull. Pixels churn and paw litter. Fresh curls mustachio over a CGI mouse. Feed your lions. We are cat lovers as we float. The breakers like heavy blue mall cops. Which heart breaks down doors? Can it be a cavern of fear or a mental cartwheel or an idling engine? They say that lions don't purr because they roar. 5. There's an ocean at the end of the corridor where the eyes have little squares in their apertures and the squares have 4 pink eyelids. White noise would be a blessing in disguise. We could sing about waves that are not nature, ocean spray. Electric string chorus swells into smell lines and unhappy meals. We have not forgotten the drive-through is open. There's a little window here, but no way out for this hatchback of sad tigers growing sadder. This next poem is a longer prose poem. It's slightly narrative. It's about 20 pages or so in the book. It's called Release. And it's called this because it comes after a time that I had been released from the hospital. And it reflects on what it's like to return to ordinary reality after that experience. But also the word release made me think about psychosis in itself, because in a way it's a kind of release of a lot of really hard, dark, pent-up emotions. So it's a little bit of both. Release. My father photoshops the word waterfall over the waterfall in the photo. In case I didn't know, in case I had forgotten. I admire the word waterfall, a clothed thing. It clambers over rocks, turning natural tricks. If only I could forget about the mega church over the hill with air-conditioned legs inside. If only I were thirsty or had a vestigial pail. It's like whale watching, waiting for my return, or like waiting for the rain to put out fires in a mega drought. Palm fronds rattle their accordion hands as I open up my mega mouth to accept my share of ashes. The ball game crackles from a tiny television set and shoves the sky into a pocket. My father stares at the air as if there were a ball there. There's a gelatinous substance on the steeple. There's a gelatinous substance, I'm sure of it, though I've never been up there. Now I'll never know love again, and love will never know me, because the world is a scheme, and a scheme cannot lift a saggy, liver-spotted hand from a hymnal. The little light in the microwave oven comes on when I open the door, and it's such a relief not to think about how little things work, like the frozen things invented by men with degrees in taste who study the desires of the tongue and approximate how I heat them. Behind every curtain, behind every cupboard, a chasm yawns open to expose the underworld. We shouted verses in the common room till the doctor said, "Shut up, or the moon will turn purple and the world will end." Is there an anecdote here that is worth its weight in salt? I throw a pinch over my shoulder for good luck getting out. We met in the common room with the psychiatrist who asked us riddles. What goes around the world and stays in the corner? The answer, a postage stamp. The secret answer, us. We had traveled far together, burrowing in burial mounds and backstabbing Bibles. The payphone in the hallway would ring into the night, and if I picked it up, I would be the prank caller no matter what. Words were candy boxes. Words had creamy centers. A little sweetness turned the heat up and the parking lot shimmered. On the day of my release, my father gave chocolate-covered strawberries to the cheerless staff who strapped me to the bed. If I ever manage a mental health clinic, I will try to ensure that the waiting room signs don't have any double meanings. Have a seat. Your therapist will be out to get you soon. A fake philodendron gathers dust in a mauve vase, the mauve of the 80s, and a wall clock has ticked itself askew. White noise blows by unused, a seaside conversation driven by the difference between prolific and productive. A productive wind builds mountain after mountain. A prolific wind jangles wind chimes hanging from the eaves. My father drinks bourbon in the backyard while I circle. Ice cubes clink as they relax in the glass, but I cannot relax because nothing stays solid forever. A man at the hospital in a striped shirt and plaid pants could see UFOs all the time, and right now, in fact. A woman said, "Girl, don't believe anyone wearing stripes and plaid." I'm waiting for the day when I've forgotten the fabric and the texture of all that, when there's nothing left to see but an old rotting barn that hasn't been used for hundreds of years. But I have no use for barns. The red barn in my head is not a real barn. I once saw a gray barn. The sooty rain-colored wood maybe was red once. No, I cannot lay claim to any barns. My father does crossword puzzles in his armchair so he can fall asleep inside a word. He doesn't worry that he won't wake up even after all the nights he watched me charge around the yard like a rabid thesaurus. I said anything in my head, and in my head was holy, 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 and Arkansas and Blake Light tragedy. Did I tell you Ginsberg visited me? He stood beside me at the dinner table and said, "First thought, best thought." But he was talking about death, not poetry. Was I dead? No, because the plates kept coming. Do you know what it's like to sit at a desk with all of this in your head? There's a keyboard carved out of wood beneath my fingers. It takes a chainsaw to write a single word. I try to sit very still as if it were a contest. Out the window, many fine young birds finding worms. The file cabinet is such a sad companion with its files full of trilobites pressed into the rocks. When the phone rings, it sounds like a lamb bleating. I hate staring at myself in mirrors, especially in the public restroom, especially on a Monday, especially right after I've small talked my way through another lie about my weekend. My father, who is not in heaven, smokes on the patio. My father, who is not in heaven, says, "It's over now. Skirt and scar, scar and skirt. I have a little cart for hauling wood. I have a chopping block. And the God swallow, the hard lump. The past is a looking glass lodged there, a gilt frame resting on the larynx. Past participles, Pangea, prairie grass, and all those scary bits, the voices before dawn, the loss of dawn. I can't admit that all these things have an underlying hum." The next poems I'm going to read all have the same title. It's a series of 3 poems. They're called Deus Ex Machina, God in the Machine, which some of you probably know is a term that we use when for plot devices that come out of nowhere and turn the story and really weren't predicated on anything. And that's a lot of what mental illness feels like, but it's also interesting that mental illness and psychosis is used as a plot device in many stories to change the direction of the narrative. So it's a phrase that I think about often. Deus Ex Machina. Soaking up the burning igloo of my nightlight sweats, I sing a song less disruptive than the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a polyester vibe, a rodeo joyride. Tomorrow will be another story, another pause by the window that can turn into a lifetime wearing cinch jackets. I lurk on the ledges, watching for watershed moments, rectory birds' nests, and fire gods be damned. When the disco ball comes on in the cabin, the sky descends in hearty platitudes. but it's different how you think of me. Check the obituary, cheek to shrubbery. The billboard described it perfectly. A suicide hotline by a slot machine spinning. Jackpot, everybody wins. Deus ex machina. Light bright envelope, an alphabet of light. Ancient men in my head, how they called to me with protractors and carapace equations. Then came the genuflection, quicksand, falling into God's hands. I fell in love like falling apples. I made phone calls, walking circles in a tidal wave of broken phonics. I wanted to know how much he loved me in whale bones, the time it takes the universe to make them. Now the world is flat again. It's a paving stone. It's a 10 million piece puzzle. I put a piece in my mouth. It tastes like math itself. It tastes like a broom closet. Deus ex machina. 1. We pulled into the midnight parking lot express lane, lost in the detail of the laughing man's face. We tractor pull umbrellaed into a nasty night of talking about the way that cows moo. If no one harmed us, we wouldn't have virtue. If no one harmed us twice, we wouldn't have philosophy. If no one harmed us 3 times, we wouldn't have prisons and places like these to save us from this cookie cutter calibrated forced entry telephone game and the cables below ground serving up their slim offerings. 2, don't take this personally, but I want you to stop telling me what to do. You and your tent revival and your terrifying omniscience. I will rent the tent and you can do whatever you want. I will bring the wafer and you can share it or not. I will repeat the vows and you can falter or not. But you know it's disingenuous, the way you never know my feelings, the way you never wear my shoes. This next poem is about one of my least favorite tasks, which is going to the grocery store. Doing it when you're depressed is challenging, and that's where this comes from. Not a walk on the beach. The air before me is the flavor of an oatcake popsicle, or a shoebox, or the water sports I'm not doing. So I sign for a prescription while all the world is water sporting in brightly colored board shorts. It's a matter of geometry. Everybody on the beach is a perfect angle. They lean toward life. They lean toward classified water sports while I decide to buy a frozen thing and enter ghost exhalation. In this place, ghosts are not much to talk about. Boating, now there's a good topic for conversation. On a motorboat, on a reservoir, as dull as the beer cans that bob in it, mouths open, but only motor sounds come out. Longing for death is like stumbling through the freezer aisle in a wet bathing suit, clutching chicken cutlets shaped like guns. But the crushed head of an accidental fall never manifests. The floor is too aloof today. Still my need to climb into the freezer. It's a matter of not fitting in, or a personification problem, or perhaps it's the prescription. Boats pull away from a dock somewhere and press their faces into the water. It's the water that makes them sicker, or perhaps it's the chicken. There's a room beneath the water where all the guns are hidden in the game system, all the grunts and all the guns, and no one water skis in the game system. No one is having any fun. This next poem I wrote after the death of one of my pets. I really thought that maybe it wasn't possible to write a poem about a dead pet. So I set myself that challenge, and this is what came out of it. Why I still use my dead pet's name as my password. 3 feet beneath the soil, there lies a dead pet. I breathe the pollen that blows from the flower stem that grows from the head of the dead pet. The perennials are more intelligent now with their roots in the dead pet's brains. The flowers watch me, their roots in eyes. Burying me here in the blue-gray of this rain today, in this field of buzzing blue bottles on this blue-flamed afternoon. The voices tell me I should be ashamed, but my fingers pet the dead pet's name into the blank white spaces where complex codes cascade into their corduroys and arrange themselves inside of rooms too small for furniture or photographs, rooms too small for pets. I know the people in these rooms. I met them in the ether. They turn on televisions, their fingers fidgeting with the blue light. Blue is twilight, blue is mermaid fins and finite. In the blue of oncoming advertisements, they're calling up the faces of their dead pets in marigolds and wagons. The little Ingalls girl goes running down the hill in her bright blue bonnet, and the world expands a bit. A man in a blue suit pushes blue pills through a window, saying, "Sleep now and be silent." There's only one android in this blue world, and his pale skin emits a blue light like a spaceship. Sleep now in this fortress, beyond the blue-skinned bodyguards, where coffins leach their secrets into the air, and the air leaches its secrets into the cars, and the cars pull into the garages and breathe. Sleep now in this blue regard, where pets curl around blue feet, and where I've gotten good at word puzzles. Say something backwards, say something missing a handful of vowels. This is going to be my last poem. It's called Delusions of Reference in a Dark Room. Delusions of reference is a term that's used to when you're seeing signs in too many things. And that can be really very exciting until the signs start not making sense, which is where this poem goes. When a ghost in this room is a sign of a ghost in another room. When ceiling cracks are a sign that the continent will crumble. When the water in a glass is the water that will drown us. When this building tells me everything about another building. When a person in the room is not a person, they are a building on fire. When the windows do not open. When my eyelid is not a fire extinguisher, it is an anti-smoking pamphlet. When I cannot read instructions. When all my clothes have prophecies stitched into them like zippers. When zippers do not open. When they gnash their teeth at blankets. Then I glance at the flowers someone placed beside my bed. A petal falls and the universe reaches its natural conclusion. Thank you. Now we're going to do a Q&A with Ellen Stone. So Ellen.
I'm back.
Yay.
Jennifer, that was so wonderful. I love hearing you read these poems. When I read your poems and you're not here, I still hear your voice. So I'm so excited and honored to be here at the celebration of your book. And I love the title of your book. I love Hypergraphia and Other Failed Attempts at Paradise. You and I have talked a lot about mental illness over the years and how it affects actually us and our lives. I'm really curious though, why you decided to write a book about your own mental illness, especially your willingness to write so openly about psychosis. That's just, to me, that seems like a topic other people keep private, or yeah, they're not willing to go there.
No, it's really, this is such an interesting topic to me because, you know, I as someone who's been psychotic many times, that experience is so strange and it's so painful and awful, and it's such a complete like loss of self.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of times we focus on the devastation of it, and it's hard to go back and look at what happened within it and what it all meant. And I think, you know, you and I have talked about this, this idea of being curious rather than afraid.
Right.
And that's sort of how I've approached it is, you know, what did happen? What was I thinking? And what was I seeing? And what was it like? Because if I can understand that better, maybe I can understand mental illness better. So that's sort of where I went with you know, writing about these experiences. And what's interesting is I didn't write about this for a really long time. I didn't write about this when I was in my MFA program.
You didn't?
No, not at all. I really, it was something I just tucked away and thought I would never want to share with anyone. And then it was only later when I was alone writing on my own. And I was actually thinking back to something that Bob Hickok said to me, who was an early mentor of mine. He said, you should always be embarrassed when you're writing. That's when you know it's the good stuff. And I realized I had not shared the most embarrassing parts of my life. So that's where all this comes from.
It's so amazing. I mean, it's just right there on the page. You're writing, well, first of all, your writing and my writing are about as opposite as they could be. So I'm always in awe. Your writing has this broad ranging, at times, I think you even used the word jangle somewhere in one of the poems. Your poems are jangly, but somehow they're also kind of luminous. They have this luminous associative quality. And still, I feel like I'm there. Like, you don't lose me. I'm there. I feel like I'm on a fast train with you. Can you talk a little bit about how you write? Because I'm curious whether it's like one long stretch of fast writing, or is it more structured and dissected?
I mean, it's really funny because it's like the title says, it's hypergraphia. Like, it actually, like, the writing I do is sometimes part of the illness I have. There's times when I can't stop writing. And so in that way, it's just it's a flood of words and language. And so it's kind of like a two-part process where I have to use my critical mind to go back and find like mine through all of this material I've created in some other state to find something that makes sense to share. So in that, you know, it's a really strange process. It's not always the process. Sometimes I can write, like, I sit down and write a poem. You know, we were doing that poem a day, you and I would conscientiously sit and write a poem. But when I get into that hypergraphia state, which a lot of this book was written through, it's more a method. It's more a means of like having to go back and find like sense in it. So it's a strange process.
A very interesting process. And I think,
in fact, I actually, a doctor told me once, like, don't write because it'll make you sick. Like, stop writing and you'll get better. So
the opposite.
I mean, it was like writing's gonna keep, like, if you keep writing, you're just gonna keep this mania going. So you shouldn't write anymore. That was the recommendation. But I didn't take it. So
I'm glad because it gives us a mirror into the way you're thinking, even though you're coming back out of it and structuring it a little bit more and making it into a poem.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot, like a different kind of mind to actually find what's worthwhile.
Another astonishing thing about your poems in this book is I actually think some of them are pretty funny. Like, there's moments where when you're reading, I was laughing at some of it. So your willingness to find humor in mental illness, and also you've mentioned to me that you have a sense of wistfulness sometime at that wildness of your mind, that you sort of wish you could go back there. So can you talk about the humor and the wistfulness? Yeah,
that's interesting. It's like, I guess when we think about, you know, something that's just horrific, really, it's easier to deal with it through the humorous moments. But you know, to be honest, there are moments mania that are very exciting, and you feel like you're just connected with everything in the universe, and it's brief, and it comes at a great expense, because it's not going to last long, and it's probably going to turn pretty nonsensical pretty quickly. But that feeling, I think that we all wish we could feel like everything was just amazing and perfect, and like and to feel that way just for a few moments it's amazing. But it's not real. So that's where the failed attempts at paradise comes in for my title, because it seems like you're always like, oh, this is it. This is the time I'm gonna be free of all problems, and it's gonna be amazing, and I can have this otherworldly experience that I didn't realize was possible. And then very shortly after that, you sort of descend into a state of madness, and everything changes. So that there is a wistfulness for those moments, but there's no way to hold on to those moments. And but the humor really is also just like, looking back, there are moments where you're like, wait, like that moment when I was sitting in the therapist's office and it said like, your therapist will be out to get you soon. And I really at that moment thought, I was like still in such a state of like confusion. I was like, wait, what is the therapist gonna really like come and get me? So it's funny, but it's also, there's a little scariness to that humor. So
I'm just so impressed that you have woven this art out of a time that was probably the opposite of art. It was out of utter confusion in a way, because it feels like there's a definite rhythm to these poems and a definite journey that we can follow. So the work that you put into it after it originally happens is definitely, it's there. I think we feel it. I also wanted to ask you talk about the function that poetry plays in your life, because I just heard you read an amazing essay about this very thing, about being mentally ill, and it was beautifully written. It was, my husband was there, and he said, oh my gosh, that is, as a neuropsychologist, that's an amazing thing to hear, because you were describing what mental illness is. And in that way, it had this narrative quality. Your poems are very different usually. So why write poems?
That's a really good question. I think that, why write poems really just goes back to the fact that the first thing I ever wanted to be was a poet. I learned nursery rhymes when I was very young, and I think I just started interpreting the world through language in this way. So in some ways, poetry is just for me, the way that I can get closest to experience. Like that is how, it has a kind of freedom. It kind of invites you to play with language in a way that will that's not really hindered by a lot of rules, so you can get closer to your experience. And I think then in that way, to get closer to the experience of mental illness, it does serve the purpose well. I'm not saying that it's the perfect way. It is like, it's my way, because it does feel like what it feels like more accurately. The essays that I write definitely, I think, are more logical. They're more accessible, and I really like to express thoughts through that method as well. But there's nothing like writing the poem, and it's not even so much about sharing the poem, because I'm not sure if my experience can be shared. But for me, the writing of it is like going back into it and processing it. So that's what it allows me to do.
All right, my last question is, I feel like as a society, especially right now, we're kind of fascinated about mental health, and we're willing to think about it. But when we have to deal with it on a personal level, I feel like we don't know what to do. We're just in shock. So what do we need to do differently as a culture with our understanding of the mind as the poet of this book? What does your book ask of us as a society?
I think that's a really good question, because I mean, I do experience the world really differently through the lens, like because of what I've been through. I can see a lot of problems about the way people think about mental illness. People will say, oh yeah, we're accepting of mental illness, and oh, that's great that someone has recognized they have a mental illness, but we certainly don't want to be around anyone who's crazy, and we certainly don't want to deal with anything outside of our reality. So because that's terrifying for us. So I mean, I think that there's like some confusion there. Like I see this too, like in the news when things happen where people were clearly psychotic and they're looking for reasons for why they did things. And I'm like, you're going to find that in an alternate reality. You're not going to find that in this reality. So understanding that there is actually a completely alternate world inside people's minds, and that they're stuck there and it's scary for them, and not like feeling like I think it's not something to make fun of. It's not something to shame someone for. They really are stuck in an alternate reality. It's like as if someone were sleeping and you were dreaming and you just couldn't wake up. That's where they are. So having compassion for that and understanding, I think I think people just don't know what it's like to be inside that mind.
Yeah. Your book really helps us. It helps us bring that into focus, I think, and make it real. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Ellen. It's been so amazing to talk to you about this too. It helps me understand myself. So
yeah, vice versa. I wonder if there are any questions from our audience who we can't see.
Right.
We've got one from Ona or Anna that is, I love the wordplay and humor in these poems. Can you talk a little more about how you bring this lightness into these often haunting poems?
Thank you so much for that question. And thank you for being here. That is like, I think something that I try to do, maybe not just for myself, but for others too. I feel like the more lightness we can bring, and the more lightness I can express, and the sort of the deeper and darker I can go as well. And because sometimes it feels like, and I was actually today when I was practicing reading this, I thought, I can't read all these sad, horrible poems. Like, this is really, really depressing. Why am I doing this to people? So I found myself consciously like choosing things that had a little lightness to them, because I didn't really want to just be in this bummer. But yeah, I do think that there's like an allowance that humor gives us to go into deeper places, because there's like a relief. So that's probably why. And also, I'm just a funny person. I don't know. Maybe my boyfriend might say maybe sometimes I'm funny, but I think I'm pretty funny. Any other questions? Feel free to ask questions. I'm totally open to hearing.
No one asks when I have one.
We've got another one from Stephanie Roden. Your poems are so interesting for the ears. How much do you read them aloud as you're editing?
That's a really good question. And I think that I need to read out loud more often. When I was reading out loud today, I was actually thinking like, wow, when I composed these poems, I really was thinking so much about sound. And I think I get so much in my head. Lately I've forgotten about sound so much. And actually working with Stephanie and I have worked together on audio pieces, and Stephanie has made me very, very aware of sound. So I think that what I'm going to do is go back to composing out loud and thinking more about sound, because I think that that's probably something I've lost track of in recent times.
This is another slightly tangential question in the chat from Ali Shapiro. You paint too. Can you talk about your connections between the visual art and your writing practice?
Oh my gosh, I have so been challenged to figure out how visual art and my writing practice connect, because people can do that. They can do visual art that has words, and they can do word pieces that have art, and mine always seem to be totally separate. I think it really has to do with the process. Like, I think that when I'm painting, I'm really, really investigating like color and thinking about the tradition of that work and like what I can do with space. And it's a very tactile experience. I just get really, really invested in it. And I think I treat words the same way. I think when I write, I kind of write like a painter. I'll just like pile a whole bunch of words on the page, the way a painter might like arrange a canvas, and I'll move things around that way. So I think it's more connected through process, but I haven't. I mean, maybe one day I will connect these things.
This is again slightly tangential from that, from Ellie Schmidt. Do you think being a poet affects how you communicate, conceptualize / experience mental illness?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think being a poet affects how I experience all of life. Like when people ask me like, oh, what does it mean to be a poet? Like, what does that mean you do? I'm like, oh, it means I just like live this way. I see and I feel and I experience in some weird way. I don't even know if I feel like I have to put words on a page to be a poet. It really has more to do with how I see. So I think that then that, bringing that to mental illness just allows me to see it the way a poet would see that. Because a poet will bring a certain kind of eye to any kind of situation. In a lot of ways, like I feel like poetry allows us to sort of see between things, see beyond the edges of things. It's always asking questions. It's looking at the backside, the other side, like really challenging us to examine and be curious. And so that's probably what actually allows me to be more curious about what's happened to me than just really didactic or really afraid or just feeling like I need to give instructions on how to not do that. Like, I think that's what poetry does from my perspective.
Something that kind of brings up and then also ties to another question that I find really interesting. Even just I'm a performer and writer too, so I feel all this too. So it resonates really well, everything you're saying. And a question from Margaret Dean. They talk about they love you thanking your psychiatrist and talking about how your wellness has actually helped your art. And then there's this misconception, and I think that what resonated with this last thing you said was, how you see the world and how you reflect the world and how you kind of absorb it comes with this curiosity. And there's this kind of big misconception that you have to be the tortured artist who kind of deep in the recesses of yourself, kind of Rilke, deep, sad solitude stuff. But what Margaret's question is or a comment maybe, is that they're curious whether your experience of treatment and wellness are part of your work. And then my add-on to that is, Um, do you think being your healthiest self brings the best art?
Those are really good questions. It's funny, I actually had a student write a paper this semester about this topic, about whether artists, because I teach writing and art and design. So I had a student investigate this idea of whether like the tortured artist was really good, like a good way to produce art. And I would say that no, because before I was able to be stable, it was hard to do much of anything. I think I still had a creative mind, and I still, I had gone to art school and painted a lot, but it was really, really hard to finish anything, to do anything. I was like, I felt like I wanted to die most of the time. So my psychiatrist really figured out what was going on. She like did genetic tests. She like really dug deep to find out what would be the best treatment for me. And that really did help. It's not perfect though. I still have a lot of struggles. And even just this last semester, I had a really bad breakdown that was pretty severe and caused by steroids when I took because I had an illness. And so it reminded me like how vulnerable I am. And the whole, like, I'm left like, because of everything that's happened to me, feeling like any moment reality could just be like taken away from me. Like every day I kind of wake up and wonder, like, will I stay sane today? And that's really, really challenging. So to at least know that there's like some treatment or some help that can like help me stay that way is really, really helpful. Allows me to be like stable enough to, sit down and write. That's why it's such a big deal to like think. And it's my psychiatrist. It's also my friends and my family who have really just been huge resources to helping me get better. And I don't know if everybody has that. I don't know if everybody gets the chance to connect with an amazing doctor or their family is just right there for them whenever they need them. And so I do feel really, really lucky in that way. But yeah, I don't think, like, I think you can produce art out of a lot of torture and pain, but you have to be really strong to do it despite all that. And I'm just not that strong. So that's probably what it comes down to.
Can you elaborate a little further and maybe just kind of then add on to that? And maybe this is our little final moment because we don't have much time, about how art can be a lovely catharsis too, that it's not just something you make when you're happy, that it is something that can really have a good output, whether that's hard or not.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like if I hadn't had art my whole life, I really don't know if I would be okay. Just there's times like when I've been really sick, I haven't been able to do writing or anything because that's just too much for my brain to handle. But I would like rip out Bible pages and like shellac them and like do erasure stuff with them. And like that was like so cathartic. Like because a lot of mental illness is like you're in a battle with God. So I was like, this is great. I'm just like scribbling on this Bible, and so I think that just any creative act like that lets you feel your emotions in a safer space, and processing them is better than holding them in or bringing them out in the world where they can actually like harm you or someone else. So I do think art's that like safe space where we can feel really, really crazy stuff.
Well, so I think we've pretty much reached the top of the hour. So it's been an honor. Thank you both, Jennifer and Ellen. Really appreciate the time. Jennifer, you said you had a little announcement. Yeah.
Oh, yes. For those of you who are local to Ann Arbor, you can stop by my porch and I have books I will sell you and sign for you if you like. And I am at 610 West Liberty, for those of you who might be in town, feel free to stop by. And thank you so much, Atticus and Ellen. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everybody too who came tonight. Thank you for joining
everyone
us.
for coming.
Yeah, and make sure to buy Hypergraphia. It is the link's in the chat, or if you're in Ann Arbor, stop by Jenny's porch. Okay, alrighty. Have a good night, y'all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.